Hey everyone, this is Stacey Rogers, candidate for governor of Kansas, and I wanted to talk about the executive order that was signed regarding marijuana and its change of schedule from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 that President Trump signed the other day. I want to give you a little background on myself so you kind of understand where I'm coming from, and then an idea of what my thoughts have been about marijuana in general and Kansas, and then we'll talk about what the executive order means, and then the questions that I still have. So, and what I'd like to see going forward from where we are today. So, for those of you that don't know, I have about 15 years of pharmacy experience and about 25 years of alternative medicine experience. And I've looked at both sides of things in the pharmaceutical world, and I kind of always err on the side of more natural answers, finding the root cause of what somebody is ailing from, to fix that versus band-aiding an issue with a pill. So that just gives you a little background on me and where I come from. So throughout my campaign, I've been asked many times about where I stand in legalization of marijuana. And I want to give you kind of just a real quick idea. I don't think, and I've said this for months and months, I did not think we were in a place where it was if it is legalized versus I think we're in a place of when it is legalized. And a major step forward towards that legalization happened with that executive order. So why I point out that I don't think it's an if but when is exactly what happened the other day. So now the question is Kansas ready for the legalization of marijuana, and does it have the infrastructure and protections in place for its citizens for the things that come along with that? And what I'm saying is, when we look at Oklahoma and what has occurred there, we look at Colorado and what's occurred there, we looked at Missouri, and there are things that were done not well at all in all of those locations. And that is what I don't want to see in Kansas. So regardless of whether I believe that we should legalize it or not, which, I'm of the camp of you're going to get it whether it's legal or not if you're using it. I don't believe that we should be using it, but we're not in that area of if, but when it will be legalized. So the response to that Kansas needs to take is to put protections in place, put infrastructure in place that makes sure that the citizens themselves are protected, not from the drug, but from the bad things that come along with legalization. And we are not currently set up for that. So let's talk about what happens with this schedule change. So if you don't know, when a Schedule 1 drug, that means that a doctor cannot write a prescription for it. You cannot get it filled through your pharmacy. And it is considered a drug that has no value. It does not, pardon me, it does not provide a medicinal value. A Schedule 2 and a Schedule 3, however, are medications that can be dispensed through a hospital or through a pharmacy by your doctor writing a prescription or an order in the case of a pharmacy, in a hospital. So when I worked in pharmacy, obviously we had medications that were dispensed from a Schedule 2 or Schedule 3, and there are very strict rules around those medications of how that prescription can be presented, how it can be filled, how much can be filled, and there's a lot of rules around that. So personally, I believe that the steps that President Trump took in changing the schedule of the medication of marijuana to a medication that could be prescribed in the future was probably the smartest thing he could have done in order to control legalization from being a free-for-all. Okay. So I've always said that, we may be not legalizing it here in Kansas right now, but all we are is one presidential decision or one governor decision away from legalization. And I'm not talking about the current administration. I'm not talking about the next administration, but administrations down the road could decide to legalize marijuana in the state of Kansas. And if that were to happen, we need to be prepared for that day of how we're going to protect our citizens. So why I say that what President Trump did was probably the best action he could have taken in this instance is it did open it up for research. It opened it up for FDA approval. It opened it up to be looked at in a different light than just the legalization that we've seen in other states. This was smart. I believe that if we are to legalize a drug like marijuana for specific medical issues like PTSD, I know it's been used in epilepsy, I know that it's been used in cancer treatments, we need to make sure that there's a doctor overseeing that treatment and making sure that it's actually doing what it's supposed to be doing and that there's some oversight to that medication. The last thing that I want to see is people self-medicating without any oversight of how it's actually working for them and if it's doing the job that it's supposed to do. So in the instance of PTSD, I want to make sure that people who have PTSD are actually getting the benefits from whatever medication they're taking. It doesn't matter what medication we're talking about. And that requires a doctor oversight. When we start self-medicating, we can have all sorts of crazy outcomes and need to make sure that a practitioner of some sort is overseeing those processes. So while I am not saying that I am for legalization, what I'm saying is I think this was the smartest step that our president could have taken in this instance in order to protect people in general from some of the bad things that come in along with legalization that we've seen in other states. A long way to say that. So the questions that I have going forward is, how is that going to look? Because then it begs the question of, now we've got Big Pharma involved. I personally believe that if at some point it is FDA approved and it is able to be prescribed by your doctor and is able to be dispensed through a pharmacy, which is the only way that I would like to see that occur, is if a doctor prescribes, there's oversight from that doctor, and it is picked up at a pharmacy like any other medication, then the questions that I have is, how is Big Pharma going to ruin it? As we've seen in the past, and I know that President Trump worked out a deal today with drug companies to lower drug prices, but how are we going to keep them in check from doing the same thing to this as well? So, personally, I would love to see a plan put in place by Kansas to ensure that Big Pharma is kept in check. And there's several different strategies for that. So I think I'll leave it there because I want to wait and see what happens over the next few weeks with this. But where we stand today, this is the response that I have to that executive order. Again, I'm not advocating for its legalization and certainly not a free-for-all, but I do want to see what we're able to do on the medical side of things to be able to treat medical issues that have not otherwise been able to be treated effectively and efficiently for certain patients in our population. But it does open up a whole lot of questions about driving under the influence, working under the influence, how that's going to be monitored and how that's going to be controlled if and when the FDA approves it as a drug that can be dispensed through your doctor, through your pharmacy. So I'm happy to take any questions. Please ask them below and we'll continue this conversation. I think that this is an important topic that I know means a lot to a lot of Kansans. And I think that it is from the perspective of protecting our citizens. I've always said from the beginning, there's no amount of money that I would want to take if it meant it would harm our people. So this is a much longer conversation that we need to have as we go along this path and see what actually occurs with this decision that President Trump made yesterday. Have a wonderful day. Talk to you soon.